Good afternoon. It is very warm in here, so I'm going to risk offending the IT guy who hooked me up very carefully. Can you still hear me? All right, good. All right, Billy Nerenberg. This is my, boy, these lights are bright. Really first time in a small town. I'm from Pendleton. Yes. So I moved to Pendleton, and my kids said, "Hey, Dad, let's go for a drive. We want to see Main Street and look around." And we drove downtown, and they said, "All right, when are we going to start?" Like, kids, that's it. This is where we are now. So now they love to come up to the Tri-Cities to go to the big city. This is where you can find like McDonald's and places like that they love. When we moved in, I bought some cows. I hadn't had cows since I was 16. And we have a little bit of land, so we bought 6 cows. And my youngest, who's 15, he understands the birds and the bees and so on, but has been in a big city most of his life, said, "Dad, we're going to have more cows, right? We're going to get a bigger herd." And I said, "Yeah, you just watch. You won't be able to tell, but one day there'll be like new cows just kind of popping up." And he said, "Well, I know from health class that's not how that happens." And I said, "You just watch." And sure enough, one day we had 6. And the next day, there were 8. And he said, "Wow, Dad, that is amazing." So a lot of interesting things that I'm learning being in Pendleton, and I'm glad to be here today. So the topic of my conversation is the human cloud. Before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit more about Cayuse. So Cayuse started as a strategic alliance between Accenture and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And basically what happened is Accenture, who used to be Anderson Consulting, they're like a $40 or $50 billion consulting company. They work with Pepsi and Coke when they're arguing over their secret plans. They decided, hey, we need to have some way to have a competitive advantage in the U.S. because we're outsourcing too much to India and Uzbekistan and other places. And they're really smart, and they started thinking, well, if we go to the Middle East and we do work, we go to Jordan because there's a tax advantage. If we go to the Southeast Asia area, we go to Singapore because there's a tax advantage. How can we find a tax advantage either onshore or nearshore? They looked in Canada, they looked in Dominican Republic, other areas that are kind of close, and someone thought, you know what? Indian tribes don't pay federal income tax. That's a great place to put some type of a security-centered delivery center. And they did, and we've been off to the races ever since then. So about 2012, Accenture exited from a management standpoint. They're still about 35% of our total business, but the tribe has been running it completely since then. And today, we're 100% Indian-owned. We've got a number of things we do, from software application development, business process outsourcing. We do a lot of data. For Intel Corporation, for example, when they want to launch a new motherboard, we take all of the reams of data they have from all over the world, put them all together and kind of shake it up in a box and then draw something out, and it says actually what partners to launch through. Our data scientists have come up with some proprietary ways to do that. On the government side, we bought a government company a year ago called Native Hawaiian Veterans. They have been working with the Department of Defense for about 10 years. Really good CPAR scores, good past performance. We applied for and got into the 8A program, so we're also a tribal or entity 8A. I happen to be in a hub zone because the reservation is automatically a hub zone, and now we do a lot of things for them as well. Mission support, force protection. We do a lot of remediation. We just won a $100 million contract with the State Department to send over people to Afghanistan and the Middle East to support some of the diplomats that are there. So a lot of really interesting things that we're doing. Trying to come up into the Hanford area out of little tiny Pendleton because I've eaten at every restaurant there 10 times and need to kind of expand. I'm getting too thin. So topic is the cloud. So when I talk about the cloud, this is usually what people think about. It's rain, a visible mass of condensed water, as my 15-year-old son, who's going to be an engineer, would say. The sun had disappeared behind a cloud. Everybody thinks of the cloud as this. The second definition of cloud is kind of gloomy. There's kind of a cloud over me. I'm kind of depressed. Well, the third, everybody kind of thinks they understand, but really the techie guys are the ones that really get it, is when you take a network of remote servers, you put them all out in different areas, and then take the data you have, instead of having it there on your laptop or your desktop in front of you, you actually spread it out. Huge, huge advantages to that, but there's some big disadvantages to that. Part of the problem is IBM when they were trying to get people to give them business, said the cloud solves everything. Because of that, this is kind of how people picture the cloud today. This is not the cloud at all. You can't actually plug an Ethernet cable into a cloud somewhere. Instead, this is the actual cloud. This is a set of servers that are in a storage facility, and all they do there is they control the temperature, make sure that there are no bugs, make sure that the dust is at a minimal level, and all they do is they run these server farms. In these server farms, you have all of this data from all over the world that's stored there, and they parse it in such a way that imagine if you had 10 puzzles, and you open them up, and you just dump them out all over the ground, and then you take pieces from each one of the puzzles, and you put them in different data centers. And then it's smart enough to where it knows which pieces are at which data center. That way, if there's a natural disaster at a data center, you actually don't lose your data. Your data is much more secure because it's all over the place. So that is the IT cloud. So now let me define competitive advantage from an IT standpoint. All of your companies likely use equipment, supplies, you've got processes in place, you've got employees, and all of those together create work. You take that work and you've got an output. Some of your outputs are products, some of them are services. All of you are creating some type of a value for which people pay you money. And if you pay less than the cost of the value that you get in, you have profit. And that's what we live on. We live for profit and have that profit grow so we can expand into new things. And we have more cows. So when I explained to my son, we had 6, now we have 8. He said, Dad, wow, that's a profit. Like, yep, except for we're spending $200 a month on hay. So actually, it's not profitable at all. So I don't recommend that unless you have several hundred head of cows. HSBC is an example here. They created an app that actually allowed you to go in each one of their different facilities. And it's like electronic banking. You can go into a facility and you see the exact same thing in that app that you would see from New York all the way through Astoria, Oregon. And because of that, they feel that they've got about a 250% team efficiency, which has created $5 billion, simply because they have this competitive advantage over other banks that hadn't gotten that in place. Similarly, Intel decided that they had these partners all over the globe, but they weren't managing them very closely. And as they kind of left them alone, they grew a little bit, but they didn't grow very quickly. So we helped them come up with a sales center where we had a whole bunch of people sitting in a room like this, and they would call out to the partners. When they did that, it grew over 3 years from $3 billion in sales partners managed up to $12 billion in sales. So that's all competitive advantage that you can get within the IT world if you set it up the right way. So if you have an IT cloud, which is like what Amazon's doing, stuff's not sitting on your desktop, but you're actually putting it in different areas, there are 3 really big things that it does. Number one, it's a lot less expensive. Think of software as a service or infrastructure as a service. The reason those exist and are growing today, the reason AWS is growing so quickly in Azure is because it's less expensive for small businesses to be able to take their data and put it there than it is to have all of the security right there in your facility. And if you have any questions about that, you can talk to Technologize. They do that all the time. The other thing is operational expense versus capital expense. Big companies have a lot of one, not a lot of the other. You guys are the same thing. It's just a lot less expensive. You can budget better if you move all of your servers out of your office into the cloud. It's also a lot faster. If you get a big new account that comes in and you suddenly have to bring in another server or a bunch of new people, it's not very scalable. You've got to go and find somebody that's going to bring those in for you. But if you have somebody host it, then you tell them, hey, look, I need this much more space, and it's literally that. They just turn it on. It's also safer. Now, initially, people thought, if I don't have my data right in front of me to where I can see it, it's not going to be as safe. But like that puzzle that I talked about, if you have pieces of your data all over the place, not only is it safer from a natural disaster, but imagine someone's going to break in and take some of the data. Well, great, now they have a bunch of puzzle pieces, and they can't actually tell what your puzzle is based on those puzzle pieces. So it's a lot safer, a lot more redundancy. So now let me shift clouds and talk about the human cloud. So the IT cloud is where you take all of your data that's in one place, and you spread it out. The human cloud is where you take all of your employees that are probably all working together now, and you spread them out. For example, if you're in San Francisco right now and you want to hire a tech employee, you're paying a lot of money for that tech employee. But there are a lot of very good tech employees who've moved into other parts of the country because they want to have cows, or because there's been a divorce in their family. They're following their children, or ailing grandparents and they're taking care of them. And what do you do if you designed the missile delivery system on a B-2 bomber and you live in Pendleton, Oregon, because your kids are there? What do you do? Well, what Carl did is he went and joined a call center, because what else are you going to do? Way, way below his experience level. So we found Carl, brought Carl in and said, hey, do you still know how to design these delivery systems? Because there's a lot of cool things that we can do. And he actually helped us start, as a data scientist, all of the things we're doing for Intel. Somebody that worked on designing the graphics of World of Warcraft. What do you do if you live in Pendleton? Think about all of the little Pendletons that exist all over the nation. And if you can find those people and bring them in, that's amazing. So what the human cloud is a network of remote workers that are physically located wherever they live and connected through the internet using virtualization and utilized to perform a service or help build a product, and replaces the need for local or on-premise employees. Now, replaces some of the need. Doesn't ever replace all of the need. But as we're going to develop, using agile methodology, a Scrum team, which is a bunch of software people that all sit in a room, traditionally, they've got to all sit in the room. That's the idea behind a Scrum team, because then they talk to each other. But our virtualization software is so good and our processes are so good, we actually have Scrum teams that include people all over the nation. They all start at the same time. They work at the same time. They've got chat going up. They have cameras on when they need to have cameras on. And instead of having to pay for all of these engineers in San Francisco, we get San Francisco quality, but at Pendleton pricing, a lot less expensive. So that is the human cloud. So let me talk about HR competitive advantage for a second. Most of you probably pay between 30% and 50% of revenue for the labor that you have. Those are not things I made up. That's what all of the labor papers say. If you're a little bit below that, awesome. If you're a little bit above that, then I hope you're very profitable. Fringe benefits average about 36% of payroll in our area. Again, if you're below that, awesome. If you're a little bit higher, then you got work to do. Seat charges, that's basically when you have an employee that sits in your facility, on average, what it costs you. This isn't taxes and FICA and so on. This is the seat and the computer and coffee and electricity and things like that. And then recruitment typically is 21.4% in our area of an employee's salary. And some of you who worked with recruiters think, well, wait a minute, they're charging me 15%, 20%. There are a lot of other costs included in that, including advertising and other types of things, and then training when they come in. And then if you have a turnover, call centers typically have near 100% attrition. If you have a law firm, you probably have a lot smaller attrition, but any attrition really hurts. It's an average of 21%. So on any one of these areas, if you can figure out a way to be 0.5% better than your competitors, that 0.5% comes right to your bottom line. In our area, I thought this was funny. This is from an article that was written about the Tri-Cities area, how our unemployment rates are high and how they need to be lower. And I just thought at 5.2%, that's ridiculously low. Oh my goodness. But Tri-Cities tends to have one of the higher unemployment rates. Why? Well, because you got Portland, you got Boise, you got Seattle. We grow people up, get them trained, and then they get more money when they move out. And we're always in kind of a state of flux that'll always exist here. Walla Walla, 4.3%. Seattle's at 3.4%. In Seattle, if you have a pulse, you can get a job. So, bringing all of this together, we need employees, and we need really good employees. When the labor market's very, very tight the way it is today, you end up hiring people that aren't as good as you need. At the very least, they need training. At the worst, sometimes they've been hopping from job to job to job, and you just don't have any choice. That's what you've got to use. Technology used to be so poor that when you talked about virtualization, it was like talking to grandma on the phone. You all know you've done that before. You talk to grandma, you kind of listen to grandma. You don't really talk to grandma anymore. You listen to grandma, but there's a lot of it that you miss out. When you're talking to another software developer in depth about the language that you're coding and error rates and other types of things, you just can't do it. You lose it, especially when a lot of those developers are in India. Completely different language, completely different culture. It's just very, very, very challenging. However, virtualization software is so good today that if you have the right setup, it's literally like you're sitting in the same room. It's very, very good. And again, I don't work for Technologize. Thank you for hosting, but they know how to do that stuff. So if you need some help, they can help you do that. When you do that, when you put those two things together, employees overall are cheaper because they live in rural areas. They're happy to work for less because they get to have cows. Less compensation, better benefits. You don't have to have the same level of benefits if you have employees that are working from home and they're happy because their families are there and so on. I ran a company in Oxford, England before this, and in order to attract employees in Oxford, not only do we have to have all of the regular benefits, gym memberships and so on, we would bring in a masseuse about once a week. I mean, lots of things that we would need to do to attract these employees because there are benefit wars going on in really tight-knit cities like Seattle. They're also very motivated. If they have a job and they live in Timbuktu and they're able to make a good wage and they've got the software so they can feel like they can get done what they want to get done, they don't want to lose that job. They're very motivated. They're also very dedicated. They become very loyal. Our attrition rate since we started this several years ago has actually gone way, way down to below where it would be for a software center. Last year, I think we had about a 12% attrition. And for the type of business we're doing, where we're about half government contracting, about a quarter software, and about a quarter still help desk or service desk, overall, we should be in the 40 or 50% range. So because we do this, not only in Pendleton, but all over the US, and now all over the world, we're finding that our attrition is going way down. All right, this is my last slide. So by utilizing the Cayuse human cloud that we came up with, we ramp up very quickly. So typically when we work with a government contract, they want to know if we can get something scoped and aligned within 90 days, ready to hire, and in the next 90 days actually get people hired and trained. It's about 6 months. That may vary wildly from what you're doing. Keep in mind we're working with the Department of Defense on very specific things. When the State Department called us up about a week and a half ago and said, hey, we've got a task order for you that's 19 people, and we need them to have them start October 1st, it's just impossible. You just can't do that. You can't go recruit people that quickly and bring them all in. Well, we've done it. In fact, we've done it ahead of time. And the reason we've done it is because we're very practiced at this human cloud idea, using the technology, all the processes in place. We've got a team of recruiters, and we're just focused on doing that. And believe me, if we can do it, you guys can absolutely do it. We, other than having data scientists, we don't have any rocket scientists that work for us, me included. So we connect very well through virtualization. It's an IBM-based virtualization, but there are 15 companies now that you can do it. We use agile teams versus waterfall teams, and if you don't know what that means, it doesn't really matter. Most people use agile today. Our client's business, Department of State, Department of Defense, very mission critical. We've got even things, Department of Agriculture, that they're focused on cows, and we just went in and delivered them about $1 million worth of hardware and training. Same type of a thing. We've got people all over the place that just come in and do that because they're connected. We've got, as I mentioned, an in-house recruiting team. It's not very big, 3 people, but they're very good at finding those people. It's really more of a methodology. Instead of trying to find our people in Manhattan or in Silicon Valley, we look all over the place, and there are a ton of people who are qualified, just happen to be in small towns. The hardest thing is actually project leadership. Imagine if you're not all in the same room, having somebody who can come in and get all these people together and herding cats and then have them working in the right direction. Process is incredibly important. If you could put the process in place the right way and have the right leader, you can do just about anything. And then what we have when we're done is typically a team that's based on, with some local people, and then probably 40, 50% of the people are not local, and they have team meetings in the morning. We've got one team, they're just always together. The cameras are always on, they're always talking. We work for AT&T right now, and we manage all of the AT&T retail facilities throughout the US from a technology standpoint. So if something goes down, we can actually see it like a wave. It's kind of cool. You see something going down, and then you can talk to people real time and say, we need to adjust this, we need to do that, we need to alert people. Those are all things that we do today. So that is the cloud, that is the human cloud, and that is how you maximize your margin, your profits, by securing competitive advantage using the human cloud. Any questions? So we have, but let me give you two examples and go even further. Excellent question, by the way. Working with software, if you haven't done that before, is akin to working with English. You're kind of talking to each other and you're kind of writing stuff down. At the end of the day, you come up, imagine you're collaborating with a friend on a book. It's really not very hard to do. Collaborating with a friend on creating a product, a hardware product or a tractor or something like that is quite a bit harder because you're not in the same room. The virtualization software is so good today that you can put cameras in place to where you can see exactly what's going on, and they have CAD software that will take the images from the cameras, and you can actually create a 3D model on your computer that's so specific that you can get down and build robots that you can launch artificial intelligence into. So we're doing that today. The first example is we do unexploded ordnance remediation. So in Hawaii during World War II, the Allies and the ones that weren't Allies came and shot a bunch of missiles and a bunch of bombs. And it's a lot more frequent of an occurrence than I would have ever thought, where a little Hawaiian kid comes up with a grenade or a missile or something and said, hey, Mom, what's this? Well, not all of them are dangerous, but enough of them are dangerous to where occasionally you read about something like that. And you just don't want that to happen. So when they find something, they're told, and all the kids are taught in school, you see something like that, don't touch it, report it. They're taught in school kind of the way that some of us were taught to hide under our desks back when we were worried about the Russians. They report something like that, they send in Navy divers, and they take a picture of it, like a massive 3D picture of it. That then goes into a lab, and they design from scratch in the lab hardware that actually will go through and take that up and then pull it into an area and explode it. And it's so advanced that they actually have something called a bubble wall. Who's heard of a bubble wall? Oh, good. I hadn't heard of it either. I can say whatever I want. You've had fish tanks before where you've got this little thing on the tray on the bottom that shoots up bubbles in order to aerate the water? That's a bubble wall. And apparently, if you send up enough bubbles, sound won't go through it. And so some of the things are having to destroy, explode in place, and so they don't kill any of the fish or hurt the environment. They put up bubble walls around it and blow it up. So those are all cool things that you can do, and we're doing stuff like that virtually. But here's an even cooler example. Who's heard of smart cities? Okay, they're coming more and more. Phoenix, Las Vegas, Atlanta. So we are in Las Vegas right now, and we're working with Price Waterhouse. And they said, hey, look, we've got this big casino. In front of the casino, we've got all of these stalls where buses come. The problem is somebody's got to manually turn the lights on. And the timing on lights changes enough to where there's a problem. And sometimes in the middle of the night, the lights don't come on because there's nobody there. And then if someone comes there and there's some type of a problem, we're worried we can get sued. Additionally, we've got all these trash cans, and because they're in the front of our facility, sometimes they're full, sometimes they're not, and we can never really tell. So we went down and installed little monitors on every trash can and little motion sensors in each one of the light booths. We pulled up 450 feet of sidewalk and laid down fiber. Then we covered it all up and connected all of those things and tied it to software to where now it automatically does what it needs to do. To do that, we actually sent a group of people that don't work for us, the whole gig economy, where people like to come in and just do little things and they'll go do their next thing. We've got this network of people all over the U.S. that do that for us. We sent them down, had them take pictures, modeled it back in our lab, got it all together, built everything we needed to do, shipped it in, had other gig workers come in, read the instructions, kind of like you're setting up a TV cart or something, put it all together, and then we monitored the entire thing. So we've got all of these scientists that are putting it together, but the actual people that are doing the work have never been to Pendleton, no idea what we're doing, because we've got this virtual team we put together. So yes, very, very doable with the right amount of planning.